All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to the 90th Scrum Pulse webinar. I was on the first Scrum Pulse webinar in August 2014. So 7 years, still going strong. Today we are here to talk about how can we integrate EBM with Scrum. I pulled a bait and switch on you. We said 60 days or less, but as we were making the slides, we think it can be done in 21 days or less. All right. Let's get started. A little bit of logistics. You will be in listen only mode throughout. I will be monitoring your feedback. So I'll be monitoring your chat messages, your questions. I'll try to address as many of them as possible. You will have a recording available. So if you want to share it with people, your friends, colleagues who didn't attend, it'll be available on our YouTube channel, as with all Scrum Pulse webinars. Share your thoughts along the way through either the Q&A or through the chat, and we will try to integrate as many of your ideas as possible into the session. All right. A little bit about us, about Scrum.org, founded by Ken Schwaber, the co-creator of Scrum. We have a global community, more than 300 trainers across the world. And what I love about our community is that we curate community wisdom through our courseware, through our assessments. There are 300 plus feet on the ground in different industries, different parts of the world, looking at our profession as it is evolving. Everybody is suggesting ideas so that we can improve our products and offerings, so that we stay true to our mission and vision, and we stay true to an ever-changing world. So that's what Scrum.org is all about. And we'd love for you to partner with us to meet our vision and achieve our mission. Today, we've got three of my heroes, people I learn from every day, every time I interact with them. I'll start first. My name is Ravi Verma. I'm a Scrum.org professional Scrum trainer and the founder and org whisperer at Smooth Apps. And I'd like Anca, Magda, and Nagesh to please briefly introduce themselves, and then we will dive in. So Anca.
Hello, I am Anca Tanase, currently head of delivery at Lolatech, a UK IT services company. I'm based in Cluj-Napoca, Romania. I have more than 15 years of software delivery experience. I've worked for companies in the travel, health, education, and finance, small or sometimes very large ones. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here to share with you how we integrated the EVM with Scrum, the challenges we faced, and what we've learned from them. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you, Anca. Magda?
Hello, everyone. So I'm Magdalena Firlit. I'm a professional Scrum trainer at Scrum.org. And I also run my two companies, MagdalenaFirlit.com and Agile in the Spotlight. So right now I'm trying to implement EVM everywhere for all my customers. I have a possibility to do so. So I'm doing it. And my experience with evidence-based management framework reaches back to my collaboration with Ravi since 2015. So I'm here to share some challenges while implementing the framework. And also I need to say that I have a very bad connection today due to my beautiful background because I'm in the countryside. So sorry when I will be switching off my camera. I respect you the most. However, sometimes for better connection, it's good to sometimes switch it off. Thank you.
All right, welcome, Magda. Yeah, technology uncertainty happens. We are in complex adaptive systems. We got to be empirical and dance in the moment. So thank you,
Even
Magda.
if we are prepared.
Yes.
Even.
Yeah.
We cannot predict.
Yeah, no plan survives contact with reality. We got to dance in the moment and adapt. All right, and welcome, Magda. Nagesh.
Thank you so much, Ravi. So welcome, everyone. My name is Nagesh Sharma. I'm also a professional Scrum trainer by Scrum.org. And I'm also a co-founder of Flowsphere India. And my mission drives me in increasing the joy and accomplishment people feel with agile ways of working. And my mentor, John Mattone, says that prescription before diagnosis is a malpractice. And that's where evidence-based management really excites me a lot. And today with the other awesome folks and also one of my mentors, Ravi Verma, I'm really looking forward to share some of the experience of me implementing EBM with different companies and sharing some learning from all of you. So looking forward for today.
Awesome. Welcome, Nagesh. Yeah, Nagesh reminded me, one of my trainers said, a mediocre solution to the right problem is better than a perfect solution to the wrong problem. And one of my biggest takeaways about EBM, I attended the first EBM workshop in Boston with Ken. And my biggest takeaway was we've got to help people optimize business outcomes, sustainable, measurable business outcomes. I think Scrum has been misunderstood and misimplemented as a terrific way to become more efficient. But what's the point of being efficient if you're doing the wrong thing? What's the point of being faster, better, cheaper at driving the car into the ditch? The intent of Scrum is to get more effective, not efficient, effective. Okay. And that's the pursuit that we are all engaged in. And hopefully we will leave you with some new ways of thinking today. Right. So I want to start, I want to pass the baton over to Magda. Magda, please give us a quick introduction to EBM and what challenges you've seen practitioners face as they try to adopt it.
Oh, of course, of course. So evidence-based management in general is a decision-making framework for an empirical approach. And what does it mean? So the reason the organization may want to implement evidence-based management is to improve customer outcomes. That's the reason. Organizational capabilities and business results in the complex environments. The framework helps improve organizational ability to deliver value towards strategic goals. That's also another important thing when it comes to this evidence-based management. So we have strategic goals, we have also other goals, and we need to constantly improve and inspect and adapt. So once we measure, we have facts, and it's easier to make decision where to move, what would be our strategic goal, and in general, what we can improve. So there are some rules using the framework. So the first one is that all 4 key value areas are measured to see the whole big picture. The second, important goals to achieve might reveal after measurement. So for example, one of the most important key value areas is unrealized value. And the unrealized value, once it's measured, it can be source of the goals because this is the gap, this is the opportunity. Once we measure unrealized value, we know what is missing in our product or in general in our organization. And another tip is to measure frequently to see the progress towards the goal. And having those facts enables actually making decisions based on facts, not opinions, not like just our gut feelings. So evidence-based management can be measured on the product level, and aggregated data may be useful to assess organizational agility. And EBM encourages hypothesis and experimentation, leads to learning organization. This is what I would like you to have, learning organization. Yeah, that's in a nutshell, And top adoptions challenges. So actually what we have, it's the first one, because there are many of them. And when we realize and when we just try to consult companies and try to implement evidence-based management, you may see many, of course, of challenges. There are my top challenges. Of course, you may have different ones as well. So what I've seen the most and the most frequent, not understanding the power of the framework. I have met this challenge quite often. It may happen, especially in the large corporate environment where not all decision makers, stakeholders, or key employees were trained in the concept. Also, the situation might occur when there is a poor understanding of empiricism that is a driver of the framework. So, for example, when the EBM was introduced to the entire organization, but only a few departments followed the framework and truly measured value. Another one is focusing on goals without measuring the organizational capabilities and market value. It might happen when the organization has a goal, but doesn't measure the impact of the actions taken to reach this goal. For example, the company set up a strategic, measurable, and time-bound goal, as well as activities that were supposed to reach this goal. No one measured the progress. No one thought about inspection and adaptation. They just filled the plan with activities that had been scheduled for 6 months. And what was the result? You can imagine. The goal wasn't reached, and a surprise occurred on that day. So focusing, the third one is focusing only on one key value area. And it's very often, I met time to market only. It's easy, right? It's easy to measure time to market, our cycle time, our lead time, our other times, but the rest of areas are forgotten. So this challenge is the most common one in my experience. So for example, IT implemented the framework and measured time to market and other key value areas were missing. And measuring only this one key value area gives you only a narrow perspective because there are 4 key value areas. And once you are thinking about only one, you have only one perspective. So it leads to a lack of understanding of the current value, unrealized value, and also other organizational capabilities. The fourth one is a lack of understanding unrealized value. This key value area indicates if there are any opportunities to the market, any gaps in customer satisfaction, any desired outcomes that might be fulfilled. This area actually can be a source of organizational strategic goals. If the evidence-based management is measured on the company level, or a source of the product goals when evidence-based management is measured on the product level. And very often, unrealized value is misunderstood and therefore underestimated, and very often not used at all. So there are many reasons why such a situation may happen. Usually this is related to the lack of understanding customer needs, current expectations, market demand, etc. Not communicating with customers also leads to false assumptions about their desired outcomes. So we assume we know better. That's also a very common approach I meet. And lack of experimentation also may happen. And finally, not delivering value to customers. And the fifth one is decision makers are not involved. There is difficulty and lots of challenging in implementing the framework when top management or key stakeholders or important decision makers are not involved, sometimes not even interested in the decision-making process based on evidence. So I frequently met this situation in the large organizations, still working with a traditional plan-based approach. It was challenging to gain their interest in empirical approaches and experiments, while the company wanted a detailed plan for the next 5 years. Yeah, maybe it looks for you somehow familiar. And the last one is being afraid of experimentation and no inspection and adaptation. So I mentioned before about experimentation, but I would put it as a separate challenge, actually. Applying the EBM framework, frequently measuring, having clear measurable goals indicate this for experimentation. And around 70% of organizations are reluctant to run experiments. That data is based on my own research in many organizations. And actually avoiding experiments and frequent inspection adaptation results in implementing unvalidated assumptions. So now you know what to avoid, at least from my perspective and my experience. There are also other challenges. And what I would like you actually to ask you to rethink right now in your heads, what are your challenges you have faced while implementing evidence-based management? Maybe you have some great experience in that.
Good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Magda, for that quick overview. A couple of questions. Max has a question. Can you give concrete examples about unrealized value? So I'll share some of my thoughts. I was thinking about Amazon. Maybe Amazon started with, I think, a book business. And then maybe they realize the customers who are buying books, maybe then they are interested in getting other things delivered to their homes. And so maybe that was unrealized value. Your existing customer has unmet needs and is willing to pay money, and those needs are not being met. So maybe Amazon started expanding in other areas. And then maybe there was unrealized value in a completely different customer segment, maybe cloud hosting, or maybe there was a completely different segment like creating a website where the skin is Barnes and Noble or MLB.com, but behind the scenes, the API is all Amazon, right? So in my interpretation of unrealized value, it could either be that your existing customer base has needs they're willing to spend money on, but those needs are not being met. So you are expanding to get their wallet share, or it could be an adjacent or a related customer set. And you're not even playing in that space, but then you go into that space and you're increasing your market share in a different space. So that's my feedback. Alberto asked a couple of questions. Can you please explain a practical way to map value streams that worked in complex organizations? I don't think we can do that in this webinar, but maybe you can contact us offline. Not all questions in the webinar, can be addressed. And how do you select the most fitting KVM, and how often do you measure and adapt them? It's a great point. I think just because we started with a bunch of indicators or KVMs, it doesn't mean that we are married to them. If they serve us in building a learning organization, let's use it. And if we learn that the KVMs themselves are not helping, let's adapt them, right? So there is no reason why the inspect and adapt approach should only be applied to the product or the organization. They can be applied to the approach of evidence-based management itself. Really great questions. Okay, let's move on. We'll try to tackle as many of your other comments and questions towards the end as time allows. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're trying to integrate two ideas that Ken came up with. Ken co-created Scrum with Jeff, and Ken created evidence-based management. And what we have noticed is a lot of people align with EBM, they align with Scrum, but the question they asked is, look, I get the theory. Tell me, what do I do next? And we are trying to give you a starter approach. And one of the biggest challenges our practitioners face is, how do I get started? And nobody knows this better than Anca, because she is a practitioner that helps companies deliver solutions. So Anca is going to go next and tell us how she would like you to get started. So Anca, over to you.
As was already mentioned several times, but not enough in my opinion, so I will mention it again. Evidence-based management uses empiricism to help organizations achieve ambitious and aspirational goals. Therefore, in order to get started with EBM and change business as usual, because we all want that, you first need to know where you are going, who you are taking with you, and how do you know if you are on the right track or not. And of course, always be prepared to realize that sometimes your track is not necessarily the right track anymore. So the Scrum team is looking through refinement activities to increase transparency on what they plan to deliver and progress, to clarify value, the outcomes, to break things into consumable pieces, of course, to reduce dependencies, and to forecast, and last but not least, to incorporate learning. So all these are subject to constant inspection and adaptation. You don't need to get it right from the first time, as Ravi said. You can experiment and see what works for you and develop your techniques, same as you develop your product. And exactly the same goes with EBM. So when integrating evidence-based management with Scrum, in the first 7 days, your focus should be on refinement. And in this context, refinement means setting your targets. So articulating your clear and inspiring vision for your product. Having this vision is important because it cultivates team purpose, focus, and identity. A mistake we are constantly seeing is that we try to make too much out of that vision. So the vision does not need to be perfectly formulated. It needs to be authentic. It only needs to be yours. And Scrum underlines the importance of it, while evidence-based management makes it mandatory. The long-term objective for the Scrum team, the product goal we are all familiar with, will be your strategic goal. So something important and far away, and the path to it very uncertain. In our experience, many organizations start without a clear strategic goal. So they can formulate the vision, but then the goal is missing. So by using EBM, we managed to make this a mandatory first step to guide our progress and to clarify better what value meant for us. Because we are all saying that we want value, but few of us actually can formulate what value means in our context. And the same goes with the outcomes we want to achieve. However, as Magda mentioned earlier, having a strategic goal is not enough. So you need to know if you are on the path, if you are still on the path. Therefore, you also need the intermediate goals to indicate that the organization is where or close to where you want it to be. And that needs to be visible in the product backlog to increase transparency so that we can better forecast and better incorporate our learnings. So now that we have our targets, the next step is to create the product scoreboard. Unfortunately, measuring activities and outputs is easy. We all know that, we are all doing that. And we are usually tempted to take the easy path, but although measuring or only thinking about desired or achieved outcomes might be difficult, it is essential in order for organizations to reach their goals. So trying to get out of your comfort zone and measuring things that you don't really want to measure or you are not really prepared to measure is key to a successful adoption. One mistake we've made when adopting evidence-based management was to try everything at once. So we created the scoreboard with all the KVAs and all the KVMs we could think of. That became very hard to understand, hard to maintain, and of course, as expected, it was slowly abandoned. So what proved to be efficient in our case was to start small and to use empiricism to get to a product scoreboard that worked in our specific context. So same as the product backlog is transparent, visible, and understood, the product scoreboard needs to be transparent, visible, and understood so that the right people are engaged in the right conversations. So we need to try to avoid information overload, and we are very tempted to do that once we try to experiment with ABM, but we need to keep it simple. We need to keep it simple in order to make it work. So to give you a very basic example, starting with only 4 KVMs, such as customer satisfaction, desired customer satisfaction, release frequency, and perhaps defect trends, might be a good enough start. So you don't need to know them all, you don't need to understand them all, you don't need to measure them all, but it's very important to focus on all the key value areas and never forget one of them. So it helps to be gentle, it helps to be patient, and to always remember that change takes time. The most common tool we've used to target, visualize, and engage were Excel sheets. Very common, but not ideal. They did serve their purpose, but they came with a lot of limitations. So lately, what we've been using is Al Dente, a tool built by Smooth Apps that helped us better understand and apply evidence-based management. So it kind of came with the theory behind evidence-based management to help us implement, and that was a lot more than what the Excel sheets were offering.
Yeah, very good.
So after the first 7 days, during the first 7 days, I would like you to think about these 2 questions. Which key value area would you focus on, and which key value measure would you use? So start thinking about it, formulate something, and just start with what you have, and do not try to find the perfect solution from the first attempt. Once we are done with refinement activities, we understood the current state and our desired goals, we can step into the experiment loop, taking small measured steps using hypotheses. So we need to focus on identifying the most valuable lead indicator to improve and to help the organization quantify the target improvement. So these 2, focus and quantify, go hand in hand. And the hypothesis, formulating the hypothesis in order to get to where you want to be is also key. So we are all used to the sprint goal. That is something that we craft as a Scrum team, our guiding light, our mission for the sprint that allows flexibility and focus, the thing that captures the why. So the sprint goal is nothing more than an immediate tactical goal, a near-term objective toward an intermediate goal. So it provides transparency and it does not change. So if you map these two concepts, it will make the immediate tactical goal a lot easier to digest, to sell, to understand. So now that we have the goal, we need to design a hypothesis to achieve the target improvement. Same as we are designing the sprint backlog, that's highly visible, that's a real-time picture of the work needed to achieve the sprint goal, updated throughout the sprint. Same we have with this hypothesis is nothing more than our sprint backlog in the EBM context. A mistake we've learned from was focusing on too many things at once. This is the same, we did the same in Scrum. We did the same with evidence-based management. So trying to improve too many KVMs has never brought amazing results. So you are running after two rabbits and most likely you will not get one. Another one was not being able to quantify the desired outcome or starting with an unknown current state. So that's also quite common. So you want to get somewhere, but you have no idea where you are. So first you need to be honest, you need to measure where you are in order for you to get where you want to be. So all these can easily turn into impediments when adopting evidence-based management. So as a conclusion, what you should be doing in the 8th day is to create focus and the hypothesis for a measurable and time-bound result that you believe will help you improve at least one of your KVMs, but not too many. So once again, I would like you to think about the two questions in your context, the KVA you would focus on and the KVMs you would focus on.
Very good. Thank you so much, Anca. I will address a couple of questions that have come along. Francisco was asking, what are the techniques to identify unrealized value? I will refer you to two workshops. One is Scrum.org Professional Scrum with UX and Professional Scrum Product Owner Advanced. I would say PSU is almost entirely devoted to discovering what are the unmet needs of the customers and users. Jerry asked, how can you apply EBM in a financial organization that's highly regulated? I've actually been doing this in a highly regulated financial organization for 4 years. And what we try to do is initially, we expose the product internally to internal stakeholders. We deploy a lot of code in dark and make sure that we get feedback without creating regulatory risk exposure, okay? What's on the product scoreboard? How does it look like? We've got some videos. So our tool is al dente. It doesn't matter. You can use Mural. You can use Post-its. For God's sake, use something. Because what will happen is when you try to visualize it, it will stir a lot of debate internally. And that's what we want, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. One of the Scrum.org trainers, Daniel Vacanti, said, I'm paraphrasing, Agile is about getting the right people to have the right conversations at the right cadence. And when you try to visualize your scoreboards, I think you will achieve these goals, okay? So I would say the tool is important, the conversation, if the tool is unimportant, the conversation is important, okay? Let me quickly scroll through and see if I can, please help us to understand what are we visualizing in the product scorecard. We just shot a small 5-minute video, which illustrates a product scorecard. In the references, we will send you a link. All the slides will be visible on the Scrum Pulse page. So you will have access to the clickable YouTube video, okay, where you have examples. For now, I think those are the questions. Questions are coming in faster than we can answer. So like I said, we'll probably leave you with more questions than answers, but please contact us after the webinar and let's have conversations to see how we can help you, okay? So now I am going to hand over to Nagesh because Anca helped us get started. And now Nagesh will explain how we can get finished with the Scrum cycle, okay? So Nagesh, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Ravi, and thanks, Anca. So Magda set a very good expectation that EBM is about goals, EBM is about evidence as well. And Anca also very well supported talking about it's not only about goals and evidence, but it's also about empiricism. And I'm going to talk a lot about that because sometime I remember one of my students one day said that if you could replace the term framework and if you could just define Scrum in one word, what would that be? And for me, it was empiricism. So how Scrum embraces empiricism and evidence-based management also complements that. So we are going to see some of my experience. So there was a team which I was coaching, and that team was initially having sprint goals, which were very lousy. And the sprint goal was more or less like, implementing the scope. And it so happened that the team started creating solid sprint goals. So one of the sprint goals was we want to onboard 30% of new customers in the emerging market through payment gateway integration. And the product backlog items were integrating Visa, integrating MasterCard, integrating MX. So it looks good, right? Because it looks that there is a goal which is providing flexibility on scope. But when we started digging deep, we realized that is this the right way of creating product backlog items? How can we embrace empiricism? Because now we know that we have flexibility. However, how can we take it one step further? Because now the goal is good, but is our plan helping us achieve the goal through experimentation loop, through hypothesis? So imagine instead of creating a product backlog item which says integrate Visa, we started saying that, hey, so we believe that integrating Visa as one of the payment options for our new customers is going to help them ease the checkout experience. And we will know it is true when the repurchase rate is increased by X%. Now, this completely changed the behavior of people because now they are thinking about, is this the right goal? And every day they are leveraging the inspect and adapt opportunity during the daily Scrum, whether we are progressing right towards our goal or not, because now they are having hypothesis-driven development. So I would highly encourage everyone to leverage Scrum events as opportunities to experiment and inspect and adapt your experiments itself. So that was one of the things, and our sprint backlog started filling up with hypothesis statements. So every PBI became a hypothesis, and we were able to pivot or persevere as we were progressing. In another instance, we were having a challenge of choosing one of the technologies of LiDAR, radar, and camera. And we were like, yeah, one of our architects said that let's go with radar. And then we said, how about running a small hypothesis during the sprint? And this is how we embrace goals, evidence, and empiricism. And we said that let's do a small spike, run an experiment, and time box that and see whether that is going to give us some kind of an evidence. And we realized that having LiDAR is a much better option because that was actually reducing a lot of risk. And then we eliminated radar and camera. So I would highly encourage everyone to embrace empiricism. That's during the sprint. So I would give this as a challenge to everyone to think what kind of experiments can you think of running? And think about this question to yourself, what important assumptions are we making right now? And how can we validate them? What experiments we will use to test our hypothesis? And how are we going to measure the result? So I would say that which KVA to focus on and which KVM would you use? So think about it.
Very good. Thank you, Nagesh.
It's interesting because one of the sprint reviews I cannot forget in my life. And this was the time when the team finished all the features which they forecasted. And the team was thinking that the stakeholders are going to be very happy today. And this team started demonstrating their increment, and they said that all the PBIs, they meet done criteria, and see, now they are expecting a 5 out of 5 stakeholder happiness index, and the stakeholders are like, none of my objectives are being achieved. And I mean, I was thinking, what is the miss? What is missing right now? So one of the big pieces which was missing was evidence-based sprint reviews. We had sprint reviews, but the evidence was missing. So here the scope of work is done, looks like the goal is met, but the stakeholders are not happy at all. So I would also like to ask all of you and think about it. Does that sound like a familiar situation to you, that you think that everything has been met, but unfortunately the stakeholders are not happy? So one of the ways in which we can inspect the increment is by having some valuable product scorecards or scoreboards. Anca talked about it, and Anca also shared that one of the tools which are developed by Smooth Apps, Al Dente, has that capability of visualizing how can you really inspect the increment in terms of the different KVAs and choose the appropriate KVMs, which will help you progress towards your intermediate goals. And the other thing which we started learning was how can we start engaging the executives during the sprint review by asking leading questions. And that is about how can we create more collaboration with them. And the third thing was based on the feedback, how can we really adapt, make pivotal changes to ask ourselves, is this the right measure we are measuring? Are we progressing rightly towards our intermediate goal? Do we need the next sprint? Do we need to persevere? I think these are some of the things we should definitely ask ourselves. And I would be more than interested, I think everyone on this panel here, to learn from you, how are your sprint reviews happening right now?
Very good. Yeah,
So
sorry, go ahead, Nagesh.
So one thing I want to close, Ravi, is to talk about retrospectives as well. And that is related to, I have seen sprint retrospectives in which most often the teams are, and this is about good teams I'm talking about, where you might have matured enough, and after that, you think that there is nothing much to improve upon. I think that's a point where teams should start experimenting with how can we make our sprint retrospectives more data-driven? How can we complement that with some kind of evidence? Are we measuring outcomes, or we are focusing only outputs? That's what I would like to say, Ravi.
Yeah, and Nagesh, couple of things I wanted to add. One of the questions that came in was, what kind of people should we include? I think both Magda mentioned, maybe even Anca mentioned about engagement. I would answer your question with another question. Who are the most important people without whose buy-in and active engagement you cannot meet the product goal? You cannot meet the intermediate goal or the immediate tactical goal. Those are the people you've got to engage with. So that's point number one. Who are the right people? The answer to my question in your context will help you figure out who are the people you need to be having the interactions with. Agile Manifesto, individuals and interactions. Who are the individuals, and what kind of interactions do you need to have with them in pursuit of our shared goals? That's point number one. Another question is, what should be on the scoreboard? Ask them, especially the executives, what matters to you? What are you discussing in the board of directors meeting? What are you discussing with investors? One of the biggest complaints that I have heard is executives are not engaged. If our sprint reviews are talking about boring things like velocity, executives will not engage. They got better things to do. Show me one investor presentation where people are talking about velocity. Nobody gives a hoot about velocity, right? We've got to understand, what do people care about? And the topic of the sprint review has to be relevant to the business. And it has to be relevant to the lives of the human beings that you are dying to get engaged in removing impediments, right? So think about who are the right people, what do they care about, and tie everything back to your shared goals. So that's what I would recommend in terms of engagement and scoreboard. And one thing I learned about from Nagesh was you've got to focus on improving organizational capabilities. And Magda mentioned build a learning organization. And the retrospective is a terrific opportunity to bring empiricism and bring in some flawed indicators to say what indicators might tell us that we are improving our capability. What indicators might tell us that we are a learning organization. Otherwise, your retrospective is nothing more than a whining session where you whine about the same things over and over again. So maybe you're transparent, but there is no inspection and adaptation. Only one leg of the three-legged empiricism stool is present. The stool will collapse, it will not work. Retrospective is not just about transparency. It's transparency, inspection, adaptation. Build a learning organization, all right? So as Nagesh mentioned, each of these events, it may be appropriate for you to laser focus on a different KVA, and it may be appropriate to look at that event using a different set of lenses, the different lens of a KVA or different lenses of KVMs, right? Okay, so let me start wrapping this up. So we tried to give you 10 steps that you can use to integrate EBM with the Scrum events, the Scrum roles, events, and artifacts, okay? Target value, visualize it in a scoreboard, engage the right people at the right time, and have the right conversations, laser focus on an intermediate goal, which is the sprint goal, quantify your targets, hypothesize how might you achieve that intermediate goal. And as Nagesh mentioned, your sprint backlog items is just a series of experiments to prove or disprove hypotheses. Kurt Bittner from Scrum.org says, all ideas are suspect until proven otherwise by the market. Realize that the product backlog item, don't get married to it. It's just a hypothesis. It's an unproven idea. You gotta test it out with the least amount of company time and money and reputation put at risk, okay? Experiment, as Nagesh said, the Scrum Guide has very clearly said you don't have to deploy to production only after sprint review. Sprint review is not a phase gate to production. If possible, reduce the amount of company time, money, and reputation at risk by meeting DoD and deploying multiple times within the sprint to get validated feedback and pivot, even within the sprint. Inspect at least at the sprint review, inspect at the retrospective, learn what's working, what's not working, both in terms of outcomes as well as organizational capabilities, and adapt, all right? So it's the beauty of Scrum is the cadence, and it helps you fail fast, learn fast, and adapt fast, okay? So this is a quick visual. Like I said, you will have all of these slides on the Scrum Pulse page. This is overlaying the 10 steps that we introduced over the Scrum framework. Make it your own. If you don't like this, that's okay. Try something else. If what you're doing right now is not working, try something else. Because if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. So if you're dissatisfied, try something new. If it doesn't work, that's fine. We'll learn and inspect and adapt in the retrospective. Okay. So these are the 10 steps. I want to share our closing thoughts. Experimentation can be a dirty word for some companies that have a very certainty-driven, risk-averse culture. I actually lost a deal mercifully because in my proposal, I used the word experimentation. And they said, we don't want to work with someone who is experimenting and who cannot give us guarantees. So realize that if you're using Scrum and if you want 100% guarantee and your mindset of success is on time, on scope, on budget, failure is not an option. It's oxymoronic. Don't use Scrum if failure is not an option. Because in the complex adaptive system, failure is a guarantee. Scrum is not that way to avoid failure. It's about failing fast, learning fast, course correcting fast. Okay. So accept and celebrate failure. It's a guarantee in the complex domain. The biggest failure is the failure to learn and course correct. That's the biggest failure. Okay. Your best friend is evidence. That's why Ken introduced evidence-based management, not gut-based management, not hippo-based management, highly paid person's opinion. It's evidence-based management. Learn from the market. And I think Jeff Gothelf or someone said, the goal of any feature is to change human behavior. So be clear about the behavior you want to change in the human beings, and let evidence tell you, are the human beings changing their behavior or not? And if not, what can you learn? How can you improve? Okay. Engage with the human beings, crowdsource wisdom. None of us is smarter than all of us. And people may respond better to pictures than they do to words. So create compelling scoreboards, make them lean forward. And instead of having to come up with your own framework, don't build your own framework. Attach these ideas to a pre-existing framework, which is Scrum. May not be the best thing out there, but it's better than building your own framework. All right. And if something else comes along, go use that. Right now, I think it's one of the best ideas out there in the market. Okay. So these are our closing thoughts. We've got a bunch of references, which will be available to you on the slide deck, on the page. What do you do next? A lot of the questions that you guys have asked are actually covered in the Scrum.org workshops. Some of you said, well, what's the difference between a product vision and a product goal? Guess what? We talk about that in PSPO and PSPO Advanced. Some of you said, how do I find out unrealized value? Well, we talk about that in PSU. And you also talk a lot about how do I get stakeholders and executives engaged? We talk about that in PAL-E. And how do I create my scoreboards? We talk, what are the metrics? What KVM shall I use? We talk about that in PAL-EBM. Okay, so these are some ideas. If you want to get these ideas explored with a Scrum.org trainer over 1 or 2 days, I would recommend that you consider these. Ask us for help. All of us are available. We love passionate people with shared values congruent goals. So talk to us. You'll be able to get our contact information from the slides. Let's do Q&A. So a bunch of questions have come in, and I will, let me set them up, maybe sequential order. So one question was, please help us to understand what are we visualizing in the product scoreboard, scorecard. Who would like to take this question? What should we visualize in the product scorecard? Maybe Anca, let me ask you to share your thoughts so we don't all wait for the other person. So Anca, if you can share your thoughts, please.
I think it was already mentioned several times. So you need to visualize what's important for your organization and your context. So there are a lot of key value measures that are available out there. Some of them might be important, again, in your context, some might not. So there are no two organizations exactly the same. There are no two products exactly the same. And there are no two teams exactly the same. So it's you can have there whatever you need, whatever you want, from NPS numbers to release frequency and a lot of flow and delivery metrics, to defect trends, to lead time, cycle time, whatever you are measuring on the product level, engagement level, or delivery flow quality level.
Very good. Thank you so much, Anca. I have another question. Maybe Nagesh can take this question. A question is from Max. So Max is saying, what kind of people do you guys think we should involve in the sprint to define our KVMs? So Nagesh, any thoughts?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I believe that, and again, I will go with the Ken's approach that whose problem is that they are the right people who has the right information. So I would say that evidence-based management provides us lens. It provides us to create a balance between organization's capability to deliver value, which means the Scrum team, when we are talking about our ability to innovate, which imagine that you would like to track your defects, you would like to track your technical debt. Now, those are your organization's ability to innovate. Now, we would like to also look into the time to market. Now, imagine it is about our build frequency. How frequently, how many builds do we have within the sprint? Build failure rate. Do we have cycle time, throughput? Now, these two are our organization's capability to deliver value. So I would certainly want the Scrum team to get involved there. And when we are talking about the market value, that means that we are talking about outcomes and impact, which means that how are you, and as Ravi said, that how are you measuring the change of customer behavior? That means you might want to include stakeholders there and maybe customers to ask them what do they really care about? Do they care about improved satisfaction of themselves? Do they care about net promoter score? Do they care about the usage? So what do we care about? Do we want customers to spend more time using our features? And then how are we going to measure the long-term impact? That is about the impact to the company itself. Are we looking for increasing our market share? Are we looking to increase our customer base? So who are the right people? Maybe executives are the right people there. So depending upon the key value area and which KVMs, we might need different kind of persona of audience to be involved.
Yeah.
That's my experience.
Yeah. And, I want to build on what Nagesh said. Actually, this is probably the 9-year anniversary of me failing my PSM1 exam. Okay. So back in the day when I took my first PSM exam, Ken used to hand grade it and I got feedback from Ken. And then I went to Boston around this time, around 9 years ago, and I took the PSM1 training from Ken and then I passed it. But the biggest failure I made was I tried to solve problems I had no business solving. And Ken keeps reminding us, ask the team. So I will reflect back to Max and anyone else who may have a similar question, which is ask the team. Ask the team, here is the outcome we want. Who do you think might be the best people? What do you feel might be the best way for us to achieve this outcome? What might be the best KVMs for us to measure and inspect and adapt to get the outcome? Because a lot of times, people like me who got promoted as managers because they had all the answers, they were first to get the answers. We are recovering. We need to recover and we need to realize we don't, just because I have a quick answer doesn't mean it's the best answer and the team has the best answer. So I have to learn to not solve problems. I have to learn to reflect problems back to the team because none of us is smarter than all of us. The bottom-up intelligence will come if you crowdsource the intelligence of the team. All right. So great question. I have a question for Magda. I think Magda maybe has already answered, but I think Lorenzo said, if you had to pick one most important KVA, which one would that be? So Magda, what would you say?
Yeah. Yeah. So as I mentioned, but I need to emphasize it maybe a bit more. There are all 4 key value areas that are important. There is no such things that we can just pick one of them. So I gave you the example when I was saying about time to market, because this is the most popular key value area, but it's picked up by the company, easier to measure. Like we can measure lead time, cycle time there, or restabilization period, or like mean time to repair our bag. And what's happening? We know only how fast we are delivering to the market, but what are we delivering? Is it something that fulfills the customer expectations actually or not? That's the question. Once you measure only one area, you know only the one area and you don't know the whole big picture. So that's why I would strongly recommend measure what you want, what is important. In some organization, for the current value, you need to measure like the whole product experience for customers, like product usage, customer usage. You may want to add some things, for example, like conversion rate, if it's relevant. If not, just skip it. And the same for all other key value areas. So you can measure whatever is important to you for your organization. But please measure in all 4 key value areas. So like ability to innovate, measure your technical debt. From the point of view of the current value, measure your customer satisfaction experience, even though your customer is internal. Because very often I've heard from my customers that they are not able to measure their customer satisfaction because they have an internal product. So what? And how many people are using a product? And the answer is, oh, 4,000 people. 4,000 people? That's a huge, like a huge customer base, and they are internal. So what they are internal? They are your customers as well. And so think about it, measure your experience, customer experience, measure your time to market, measure also your ability to innovate, like for example, bugs, technical debt, but always, almost always in our organization, even small organization exists. And also measure unrealized value. So what is your customer gap and when it comes to the satisfaction or customer experience? And also what is your market share and what is the gap? How many % of the market you are taking actually?
Yeah.
And what is possible to take more? So that's why I'm saying in the short answer, measure all 4 key value areas. And of course, just adjust your measures.
Yeah, and I would build on Magda's feedback. Anca said, start small. I would say even if you pick one metric from all 4, I think that is better than picking 4 metrics from 1 KVA. Because if you say, because you say, okay, let's improve time to market. You can make developers work nights and weekends, and you can optimize. You can optimize for time to market, but you will sub-optimize for maybe the future time to market or the capabilities, because developers are going to resign. And guess what will be your time to market when you have to hire new developers and onboard new developers? You can optimize for revenue, and the sales force will go and they will give crazy discounts and they will promise crazy features which have not yet been written. So guess what? You optimized for current quarter's revenue, but you sub-optimized for future quarters. And guess what? When the actual practitioners and users start using the product, they will get unhappy. But if you're not measuring unrealized value, the gap between the desired target satisfaction and the actual satisfaction, then you will not realize that in the pursuit of meeting last quarter's numbers, you screwed up the next 10 quarters numbers, right? And then lots of escalations, developers leave. It's a horrible cycle. So please resist the temptation to optimize in one area and sub-optimize for the big picture. All right. All right, friends, great questions. We've got 3 minutes left. Like I said, I hope this intrigued you. It gave you a new way of thinking. Please contact any one of us if you want to have a deeper conversation. We have lots of free, curated, high quality online resources at Scrum.org, where you can continue your learning journey without spending a single dollar. One question was, how do we map topics to the Scrum.org courses? I think every course has a data sheet. There may even be a mapping of competencies to courses, but maybe we can answer that on the Scrum.org webpage when we publish this webinar. So look at the Scrum.org learning path so you can find curated resources to continue your learning journey. Please follow our social media channels because we are constantly sharing curated high quality content. And let's stay in touch. So hope you found this useful. Until our next conversation, thank you, keep calm and Scrum on.